All right, good morning. Welcome back to our very last consultation for FINA1221 Introduction to Finance. And as before, I don't have any format I want to follow. So this is mainly just to answer your questions. And yeah, and I've got my iPad here. So if there's anything that we need to write on, I can use my iPad. And so far I've got actually just one question from the chat box. So you feel free to utilize the chat box, send through questions. But so far, the first question I've got is that I'm still confused about chapter 10 and 11. And well, I believe you're talking about week 10 and 11, not chapter 10 and 11, because chapter 10 is not examinable. Chapter 10 is the second part of the equity valuation. You don't need to worry about that. Can I explain that? I suppose the reason why the lecture recording will be 2 hours for each one, it means that probably need 2 hours for just each week as well. So I would say, and then the second question related to that was, can I explain the concept of beta? And I think I covered that before. So I would use that as the first question to talk about beta. And how long should we spend on each question? That's coming from Lorenzo. I guess I can answer that question first. In our understanding, your final exam has longer time than this math exam, has fewer questions per mini basis, and I think you should just spend enough time as needed for each question, right? Some of the questions are really qualitative understanding. It wouldn't take you time for you to choose from A to D, right? Because it's really just based on your understanding. Some of the calculation question, depending on the mark allocated to it. So do pay attention to the marks allocated to each question, because they are not even. It's not like there are 2 points for each question evenly. No, some of the questions have more marks to it. So which means that the one that allocated with more marks spent a bit more time on it. So let me just read the chat box for now. Okay, regarding the beta valuation, just to confirm. So beta, let me share my screen if I can. Let me open up the PDF first so I can then share my screen. All right, you should be able to see this PDF in front of you. Is that lecture 11 week portfolio series that you guys can see? All right, perfect. You know, some university would actually have a teaching assistant to help monitoring the chat box, because you know like I'm just constantly jumping between the chat box and then my share screen and everything. So over here, the way how you understand beta, really you shouldn't understand anything more than just the formula. So here's how you would calculate beta on slide 47, right? So beta really, in the way how you would quantify it, it's just the covariance of the asset return with the market divided by the variance of the market return. That's it, right? I mean,
is there any correlation that coincides with beta, or it's only covariance?
Well, I mean, given covariance is defined as the correlation of asset and market times standard deviation of the return of the asset times standard deviation of the market. That's one way to, I mean, there are two ways to write it. They're equivalent, because if you, let's see whether the covariance formula is in this week. There we go. So given how correlation is defined to be covariance divided by 2 standard deviations, standard deviation of the asset and standard deviation of the other asset, which means that you can really write it as so given, jumping to 47 again. So I mean, it doesn't matter which one you focus on because they're equivalent. Really, this one is just utilizing the fact that covariance equals to standard deviation of A times standard deviation of B times correlation.
Yep.
So which means that you can really just convert that into this form. They are equivalent in terms of calculation. I mean, when you calculate covariance, if you are given covariance, use covariance. If you're not given covariance, if you give a correlation, then use correlation. Then use that part of the formula. So And so beta really is trying to, I'm not saying it actually does, but beta actually tries to quantify the systematic risk. So hopefully that answer
a systematic risk.
Correct. So
that means the whole market risk as a collective, basically. It's not specific for that company risk. Yeah.
Let me share my let me use my iPad just quickly, just to, I mean, I know I've done it before, but you know, this, I can do that again. So what we're trying to say here is that there is something called total risk, which is quantified here. We're trying to approximate it by volatility or standard deviation. They are the same thing. Or square root of variance, right? Square root of variance. Or you can just think that's variance, because really that's the same thing. What we're trying to say here is that there's something called total risk. And in a large enough portfolio, you only have system so I mean, in a large enough portfolio is mainly coming from the systematic risk. And so over this level, in this firm level, this is firm level. For the firm level, every firm would have, every firm means like company, asset, could be a bond, doesn't have to be a firm per se, but we say firm level just means at the individual level. At individual level, everyone is exposed to systematic risk and firm specific risk. Well, systematic risk just means that you're coming from your correlation, your relationship with the market. Well, firm specific risk just means that that risk coming from yourself, right? Coming from yourself. So which means that, for example, let's say Frank, let's say if you're going to watch a movie today, what kind of risk are you facing? Well, I could say, well, the risk I'm facing is that there are a COVID risk, which coming from a systematic, because there could be COVID-19 somewhere out there, right? So that means if I step outside my house, I have some chance that I get exposed to the what do you call the COVID risk. But the other one could be firm specific risk, because it could be that I might have a heart attack. Fingers crossed, touch wood. Hopefully I'm not, right? but I'm not going to watch a movie today. But I just say it could be coming from myself. It could be that I have a heart attack. So that risk is independent from everyone else, right? Everyone exposed to COVID, but maybe I'm in particular would be exposed to heart attack risk. Because I live healthily, because I don't do exercises, because I eat too much meat, I don't eat too much fried food. But that's really just fun specific. That's just specific to myself, right? Yep. And what we're trying to say here is that the return risk rewarding, so high risk, high return, exists for systematic risk, right? The higher the systematic risk, the higher the return, right? Not firm specific risk, because firm specific risk is something that something that as an investor, you can diversify that part out. So that part can be diversified if you're taking many different type of companies, such that let's say your portfolio would then have a smaller chance get exposed to one of the CEO having a heart attack, because a CEO having a heart attack is really specific to that company. But if you have whole large enough portfolios, then the chance that that CEO has a heart attack affecting your whole portfolio is getting smaller, right? Yeah. So what we're trying to say here is that part of risk can be eliminated, but the systematic risk is the one that rewards you. The higher the risk that you're taking, the higher return. Lower risk you're taking, the lower return. Yeah. But can we quantify that like very rigorously and scientifically? I'm putting my scientist hat on. Can we actually do that? No, we can't. Right? That's just bear in mind, we can't actually tell you exactly what systematic risk is for BHP, what firm specific risk component is for BHP. I wish I can tell you a number saying the systematic risk today for BHP is 1.65, where the firm specific risk for BHP is 0.26. I can't do that. All I'm trying to do over here is just to describe you a framework such that you understand there are two forces in play. And we're trying to say here, we're trying to argue here is that I'm trying to argue here is that, of course, it shouldn't reward return risk per risk for firm specific risk, but it should be rewarded for taking more systematic risk in that sense. So and then that helps you to explain in which case I'm going to share my screen over here.
You need some level of risk because you need risk to make money, don't you? So,
exactly.
yeah.
So I mean, so combining all of them together, it actually helps you to explain. Wish I can have this slide is around the corner somewhere. There we go. It's trying to come up with this relationship where on the right hand side, this is what you call security market line. It illustrates a relationship between return and beta, where beta is used to measure systematic risk for companies. So over here, we end up with the same linear relationship, which means the higher risk, higher return. Where for on the left hand side, when you're using volatility, which is our total risk, to measure risk for individual companies, we don't see that. Because if you take a look at ExxonMobil and Merck, right, you can say that, well, this one gives you the same return as that one, or Campbell Soup, or that. Yep. But it actually has a lot lower volatility. Why is that the case? Well, does that mean that the risk return does not exist for individual companies? It does exist. It's just that we have to change our definition for risk at the individual level, which is the systematic risk, which is then quantified by beta, right? And how accurate this figure is in real life is not as accurate as you think, right? It's very unlikely you will see a straight line like that in real life. Doesn't really apply to every company. I mean, all you see over here are big companies, right? But it doesn't really apply to smaller companies, and sometimes they failed. But that's fine because we're talking about a model, right? A model. We're not talking about, we're not talking about like a, what do you call it, like law, like E equals to MC squared, that's that kind of like physics law.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. So why is it that the correlation metric is the preferred one to use, say, over covariance? Why is it they prefer correlation over covariance? Why is that?
So here, I mean, I was going to move to the next question, but I'm given, I guess, suppose many people would ask the same thing over here. So although correlation and covariance, the signs are perfectly correlated, which means that if covariance is positive, the correlation will be positive, right? But the thing here, but the reason why people prefer to use correlation to measure the relationship between the two instead of using covariance is because, well, first of all, it's a lot easier to understand because correlation bounded between -1 to 1, right? So which means that at -1, you know that's at one extreme, which means they are completely the opposite. Where if it is at 1, that means they're completely correlated, like they are just the same thing, right? It's more like an asset to itself, right? So it's a lot easier to interpret. But the other thing here is that it's because covariance, due to its calculation, which if you take a look at its formula, right, is such that it is very possible that you have two same covariances, say that all equals to 0.00546, but because it's coming from two forces and it's highly influential by outliers, and outlier here means that some influential point where you could have two same covariance, but they have very different correlation relationship. Okay. Because it's coming from, because it could be driven by one of them, and then it could be driven by a like large outlier, because here is return minus the mean. So instead of going in details about why that's the case, you can just think of it is that, well, if we have, you can have two pairs, A and B, C and D, two pairs. Covariance of A and B is the same as covariance and C and D, but the correlation could be very different. Where the correlation here is that you can think of it as like a standardized covariance, because it's standardized, it has standardized by its own volatility, standard deviation. Okay, right, yeah. So you can bring that extra extreme value back into a window that people can understand. So I mean, that's probably the simplest way I can explain why covariance is not preferred as correlation. But after all, they are all just statistical terms. This is a definition people come up. People decide to say that's how you would calculate covariance. we define.
That was Bella, that you said that when the covariance is positive, as is the correlation is positive too. I never realized that. So
yeah, I mean, and then when covariance is negative, correlation is negative as well. I mean, the sign here are like completely correlated, but it's just that correlation is a lot easier to be interpreted.
I thought they're two totally different metrics, two totally different purposes of where. So, but now I know. Thank you.
No worries. So I'm gonna move down a slide. I'm gonna move down your chat box, just go through each one of them, and so it's gonna take me a while to read all that to decide which one I should go next, given what we're talking about in a moment. So I'm gonna come back. So Gabriel asked me a question regarding to test 7, question 5. I go back to that because we are talking about this risk first. Let's see whether there's any relevant question, related question over here. So Jiaxing was asking, for the week 11 short answer question, should we be expecting a question asked us to calculate stuff or question asked? Well, you should expect both. I mean, given the weight allocated to week 10 and week 11 are relatively high, if I were you, I'll be prepared to be answering both, right? Should I be worried if I feel like I cannot explain we're not going to ask you to derive KPN. That's being insane. But it's what we're trying to think about is what contributed towards the derivation of KPN. Like what's in the middle. Some of that you probably will require to have a solid understanding, right? Does that answer your question, Jiaxing? No. Okay, good. So I mean, for example, I won't ask you a question to say derive KPN because that would take, I don't know, a very long time. And plus, you have your lecture slides in front of you. It's an open book exam. Why would I ask you if you can just copy and paste your lecture notes, right? So I have to be somehow creative to ask you a question that would be taking a snapshot of the whole process and ask you to explain one of the steps. Maybe I'm not saying I will. I'm just because I actually don't remember what your question looked like, to be honest. Yeah, but something that's reasonable. I will ask you something that really is reasonable to ask you, test your understanding, and after all, is open book exam, right? So, and okay, the others are regarding to MCQs, and there's one more question related to betas. Firms have different betas, so they face different levels of systematic risk. Correct. So beta here is trying to quantify systematic risk. The higher the beta is, the higher the systematic risk is. The lower the beta, the lower the systematic risk. But we're not saying beta here is a perfect measure for systematic risk. And because we don't actually have a proper definition for what a systematic risk is. So which means if you think of it is that we show you one definition for systematic risk, but that definition itself is not rigorous enough to tell you exactly. Think about like a typical dictionary to tell you exactly what are systematic risk. Like we tell you roughly what they are, but we don't tell you how actually can quantify it, right? And let's say if a company is never traded before, there are no return history. Does that mean it has no systematic risk? No, it exists. It's just that we can't quantify it, right? All right, so I'm going back to the start of the list to talk about test 7, question 5. And I don't actually have the question. So, so this is what happens every time, right? What happens every time that when people ask me a question regarding MFL, I have to go there and then open up the question. It will be a lot better if you can tell me what the question is. So I'm gonna stop sharing because it's gonna be something sensible because there'll be people's names coming up. So I'm going to turn off my sharing. Once the question pops up, I will share my screen again. Some of you may note that on a discussion forum, every time I see someone, most of the time, when I see someone posting up a question and then attaching the question as well, I pretty much would say, this is greatly appreciated. Because you know, because that would save me at least 2 minutes to load up my questions. There we go.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So this one is question test 7, question 5. Let's have a look. If you have your test, if you can open up your own one, that'll be great as well. So you can take a look. But then we're just gonna have different numbers. All right. So let me share again. Give me a second. I'm pretty sure. Sharing screen. I'm just gonna show you quickly to point out. So here is asking test 7, question 5, because I'm pretty sure someone asked that. So I will point out where it is to you, and I'm gonna explain it. It could be the rounding issue from memories, because I think 1 question or 2 questions in that week would have a problem with rounding algorithm. So someone asked that test 7, question 5. Let's take a look at that thread. Yeah, so I did some explanation over here. And if it happens to be that you don't get the same answer, rounding, and let's just open up Excel. Go and take a look at the question. So here, this is the question. I'm going to label it up. MFL 7, question 5. And here's the screen. Because every time I click it, you were just gonna be give me a new number. So I'll do that. I mean, as before, this one will be made available as well. This one, but given that the exam is tomorrow, I don't expect anyone to rewatch it. So here it tells you it pays no dividend but spent $5.05 billion on share repurchase last year. And if the equity cost of capital is 12.2%, and if the amount is expected to grow by 8.9% per year, so here the whole repurchase amount, so you can think about dividend plus repurchase, is 5.05 billion, but that's in year 0, right? So we want to find out, I mean, what is in year 1, because year 0 is irrelevant because it's just paid, right? So which means that you want to focus on what's going to be the next one. So given the growth rate, it's going to be 8.9%. And then cost of equity is 12.2%. So what we have the next one is going to be that one times 1 plus the growth rate. Right, and then your valuation formula is just equals to the amount divided by E minus G, right? Which is gonna be equals to that divided by RE minus G. So that gives you the market capitalization. That's the valuation. That's the market cap. I mean, let's just use the same notation as with it, and that's the market cap, 166.65, and share price equals to that number divided by number of shares outstanding, which is 5.8 billion. It's $28.74.
I wish I knew this at the start of this course.
Haha. I knew about what? Knew about the connotation?
Knew about all these equations, how to do it, and
well, it's not too late to know that, but yes, but well,
you know what I mean. I was just joking.
Yeah. So that's question. Does that answer your question? Trying to.
Yeah, but it's like kind of similar to what I did, but yeah, it answers my question.
Okay.
Thanks,
so
Frank.
no worries. So normally people would what the mistake people typically make is they forgot about the growth rate, because it tells you it's spent which means already passed, but you want the one that is going to be paid out, which means you want to find out the next one. So that's, I mean, the reason why I don't use a single formula to do everything, but to decompose it is just to make sure that you know how how it actually goes. So yeah, but there we go. That's the question. We can move on to the next one. Let me save it. Where do I save? FINA1221 workshops consultation on 7th of July. Last one. Perfect. All right. Next one. Moving down the list. Could you go through questions 37 and 38? Let me see what actually I've done it before. I mean, given if I've done it before, I will definitely redo it again. But let's just see. No, we haven't. Good. So that is the practice questions 37 and 38. So it will be available from here. Loading. You can imagine, like, really, my life would be saved with a lot of time if people actually attach questions. But of course, I understand that you can't actually paste questions in the chapel. But just sort of like trying to explain to you guys as a joke that when I was answering the discussion board questions, a lot of time was spent on loading the screen. Over here, final exam practice questions. I believe that must be this one, right? The MCQs. I don't think the other one would go to 37. Yes, okay, great, perfect. So 37, 38, okay, there we go. I like the question. Someone actually asked that. That just reminds me of someone actually asked that question. So let me just explain over here. So MCQ 37, 38. All right, question 37. Can you guys see the Excel? Can you see that Excel, Lucas, by the way? Okay, I mean, because I did share the whole screen, so just in case. So this company, so this one, one way as a one bonus point that for people who are attending, who are going to watch the video recording, is that is highly likely this kind of question will come up, right? Highly likely. Again, I haven't seen the exam yet, because no, I did see it because I set it up, but I can't remember what it is. But I'm just saying, my gut feeling is that this kind of question is highly likely to come up. There we go. CND. We need CND because we need the answer, right? It's important to have the answer there. So this one, there is a harder variant of that question. So for some of you did the MFL test before, you know there's a question related to the PISA, right? That one is a lot harder than this, because that one is like there are multiple levels of confusion. Let me just show you where it is. So then we talk about this question. So Matt, if you want to quickly check, actually, no, here's here. If you want to have a quick check, 37 and 38 would explain here, but I can't actually find that question myself because people don't put that in the title. Anyway. Okay, no, this one. So that's one way, just to search food for less. Nope. Can it? Oh, there we go. Oh yeah, because I'm actually going to change the heading. So in formal 5, Let me quickly edit that thread if you don't mind. 37, 38, 47, 48, 59, and 60. Okay. Right now, added the subject title, just in case people freak out like their title is changed. Yeah, so 37, 38 over here, I did a quick explanation over here. So let's go through that now. This is my answer before, but let's just do it here. So if you rate it, it's saying the new revenue is going to be 150 grand, and it currently offers overnight film processing with annual sales of 100 grand, while many of the 1 hour photo sale will be to new customers. So which means then they at the moment they have overnight film processing for 100K, right? They're offering a 150K. So if you think of it, is that for people who are going to buy 150K, it could come from their new customers, it could come from the existing customers. And actually, it's better for me to draw a pie chart, because that's one thing I can't do to on the discussion forum. Doesn't matter how many words I put over there. I think it's a lot easier sometimes just to draw the diagram. So this question. Can you guys see my iPad?
Yeah.
If you think about this, in new customers, right? Sorry. New sales, right? You can come from two sources. New customers, right? And old customers. Because I mean, if you think about your customer base, if you start selling something like in a shop, and then you could think of it that could come in from new customers who never bought from you, or it could come from the old customers who would always shop from you, right? But why does it matter for us to differentiate them? It's because excuse me, because of cannibalization, which means if you think of it, is that the old customers are the one who used to purchase your existing product. So which means that which means some of the sales coming from old customers means that they no longer buy you existing sales. Does that make sense, Lucas?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So which means you want to figure out, because here what we want to do here, we want to do the incremental analysis.
When you say incremental analysis, you're referring from an accounting perspective, yes?
Well, no, we're coming from, really coming from finance. Oh, it's actually not accounting or finance. It's coming from understanding where, I mean, so here, if you don't take this project, you would receive X. If you do the project, you receive Y. But you want to think about the difference between Y and X. How many of them is actually driven by because of you have done it? By because you take the new sales. So for example, so over here, given that the new sales here is that it could come from the new customers, it could come from old customers. If it's coming from old customers, it could mean that they no longer buy your existing sales. So which means that's what you call cannibalization. It's a long word, but you roughly guess that's a cannibalization, right? So which means that it eats up your existing sales. So which means although you will receive 150K from your new services, from your new service, but it means that you lose some revenue due to your existing one. I mean, one of the perfect examples people usually say is that by introducing iPhone 12, right? There are going to be new sales revenue going to iPhone 12, but it could come from people who used to buy Android phone. It could also come from people who used to buy, who are going to buy your iPhone 11, but no longer going to buy iPhone 11 because iPhone 12 is exist, right? So that which means that iPhone 12 takes up the sales from your existing product. You do want to think about what kind of an impact that will be, right? And what makes slightly complicated in this question here is that, I mean, this is part A, right? This is part A. So let's just put all the numbers in here because you guys can only see one screen. So I was just gonna, so please trust me on the numbers. I'm just gonna read out the question. So food for less, they will get 150K for the new one. And the existing one is 100K. I'm just gonna put all the numbers here. And while many of the 1-hour Photoshop coming, 60% of the current overnight photo customer will switch. So which means in this case, 60% of this will go to new sales, right? So, and the question asked me saying, what is the level of incremental sales associated with introducing the new 1-hour photo service? So in this case, let's just say, you know, because Matthew asked that question, so I'm gonna direct all the questions to Matthew. So Matt, if you think about it, if the new sales is gonna be 150K, and you are told 60% of the 100K sorry, if you think about that, the 60% or 100 grand will be contributing to 150K, right? What is the new customer's share first? I mean, what's 60% of 100K?
60 grand.
Exactly. So which means if 60 grand coming from your old customers, how many would that come from your new customers? $90,000, isn't it? Exactly. And if you take a look at the question, which the answer is $90,000, because I have to move the screen. So it's $90,000. So that's question 37, which is probably a lot easier. Okay, let me just get rid of that. This is actually question 37. And now it's going to 38. 38 is slightly complicated, right? I guess that's where people get confused. So the question goes, suppose that 60% of the current overnight photo customers, half would start taking their film to a competitor that offers 1-hour photo processing if FFL fails to offer the 1-hour service. So in this case, what is the incremental sales? And this is where it's worthwhile to discuss further. Okay, again, back to this iPad screen. So now let's think about it as a third party. It's called competitor. Right, competitor. And what they are saying here is that even though 60% of the new sales coming from old customers, but we have two important numbers here. 30% of the 60%, because it's saying 50%, right? So which means 30% would actually go to your competitor if you don't. You can't see my writing. See me writing. Okay, good. So 30%, which is 50% of 60%. So let me just get 30% equals to 50% of 60%, right? Just let me put that number down. 50% of 60%. So 30% will go to a competitor, and 30% will switch to your new service. So then, and the key here is that how do we interpret this 30% will go to competitor? So which means if you don't offer these new sales, you're gonna lose 30% of your old sales, regardless. So which means there are no longer cannibalization. So which means, just think about it, it's like if Apple is not introducing iPhone 12, you have some people, some of the Apple customers gonna switch to Google phones. So which means in this case, your customer is no longer taking from your existing sale, but your customer is taking from the competitors. Does that make sense? So which means that 30% over there, whoops, that 30% over there is no longer a cannibalization effect, because they will switch to your competitor if you don't introduce the new service. So which means, in fact, this 30% is the new sales as well. Because if you don't introduce the new service, they will go to a competitor. So you will lose them permanently anyway. So which means in this case, it's not, so in this case, they are not using your old service. It's not because your new sales, your new service. It's because they will switch to a competitor regardless. It's their change of preference. Does that make sense? So which means your incremental sales is your 90 grand from the first case, because that's regardless, plus customers have changed their taste. Because they have changed their taste, they are not going to buy your old service anyway. Does that make sense? Customers who have, so 90K is what coming from new customers, plus a portion where is the customers who have changed the taste. Sorry, it's actually all customers who change the taste, right? Because coming from the existing one. And this all customers have changed the taste. So which means they are not going to keep using your old service. So which means even if you don't introduce the new service, you're going to lose them anyway. So that they are not cannibalization.
So cannibalization is a process of one particular market.
Cannibalization means that your new service eats up your revenue from your old service.
Okay.
So because they have changed the taste, right? This is an additional information, right? Additional information, they have changed the taste. They are not going to buy your old service anyway. So which means introducing the new service is not taking up the sales from the old service, right? Because they have changed the taste. And how do we work out this number? The question tells you 50% of this 60% of 100K coming from them, which makes 100K times 60% times 50%, which equals to 30K, right? And such that equals to 90K plus 30K, which equals to 120K. Let me just write on the same page. Does that make sense? Does it make sense, Matt? Kind of. Let me switch back to the the screen. If you read a question again, so the question here is saying, suppose that, so this, I mean, if you understand 37, then you understand here, 90K coming from new customers, 60K coming from old customers, right? So that we should be happy with 37, right? Sum up, okay. If then we move on to question 38. So here is saying, suppose the group that coming from your old customers, half would start taking their film to competitors, which means that in this case, even though they're all your old customers, but they won't be your customer again if you don't offer this new service, which makes it to be not eating up your current sales, right? Your existing sales, because they will switch anyway. So which means what I'm saying here is that if you're not going to offer this new service, your existing sales is going to go down to 70K, right? Because some of them is going to switch to a competitor, right? Because we want to look at the incremental level. So in this case, if they are going to, coming back to the graph. So this is the question. Coming back to the graph. And coming back to the graph, knowing that half of the 60K, will go to a competitor. That means 30 grand of the revenue will go to a competitor if you don't introduce the new sales. That means the new sales would capture them, right? The new service will capture this $30,000 of revenue, which makes it to be 30 grand. So that means your incremental is more than before because you have saved your business because they will go to competitors.
Excuse me, Frank.
Yes.
What does incremental earnings mean in general?
Incremental earnings just means the earnings that really coming from driven by the new project. So Celestian asking why is it 30% times 100K? So 30% times 100K coming from this 100K times 60% times 50%. And then Taz goes, what sorry, not Taz. Matt goes, why don't you subtract 30 grand? You could subtract 30 grand. It's the same thing, right? I mean, in this case, the numbers are the same. So, but let's just say if you're not using 50%, let's say if you are using, like, for example, if I just change the question, if I say, so here, I mean, hopefully it doesn't make it more confusing. If we change the question to if 80% of your 6% all customers will switch to a competitor, right? So let's say if 80% of your 60% all customers will switch to a competitor, that just means in this case, that just means in this case, because of a new service, you have captured additional this. That means that means you only eating up 12K of your existing service, right? That means 80% of your new 60% customers will switch to a competitor. That means if the majority of them will go to a competitor, but because you introduce the new service, you're able to rescue a business such that they will come back to you and use your service. So which means that should be the incremental sales because you wouldn't otherwise get it, right? Perfect. So okay. So just need to make a note as to change the question. If just in case if anyone gonna rate the PDF saying what the hell, where does the 80% come from? All right, let me share screen again. So there's another question related to that in your discussion forum, and I think that one again that one has actually got I actually wrote a bit more details. There we go. That's the task 9, question 6. So if you take a look at the question, I assume you guys can see my screen because I just shared my screen. Okay, so that could be another one that you want to just sort of just test your understanding on. You can go back to test 9, the revision one, duplicated one, go to the test 9, go to question 6, refresh, and such that see whether you can get the same number every time, right? So that one I did a bit more details, but it's unfortunate that question has 50%. Every time you have a 50% in a question, it makes confusing because sometimes depends on how you would interpret 50%, right? Because 50% on either side is 50%. But if it's 40 and 60, that makes it a lot clearer. And I think I did explain it. So I use a different scenario in a sec for someone who's ask a follow-up question. So, but I guess my point here is that if you're still not sure, you can go back to test 9, question 6. Just try that test 9, question 6, and to see whether you can actually get a correct answer every time. And that's the only way to show your understanding, right? Because you may be able to say, you know, I finally understand it now, but when you actually see different numbers, then it's all different. Okay, so test 9, question 6. And so Lorenzo was saying, so it is 90 grand plus 30 grand equals to 120 grand. Yes, that's how you get 120 grand, right? That's where the answer is, 120 grand. That's how you get it. I mean, I wrote it like this on a discussion forum, hoping people can understand, but it looks like didn't. Yeah, because whenever you have 50%, it's just confusing, because either way is 50%. All right, so okay, let me check the chat box again. It's been a while for me to take a look. Again, going from top to bottom. Lorenzo is saying, can you please remind us, this is from 10:12 AM, right? Could you please remind us when to use EAR and when to use APR? The only chance you use EAR is when your cash flows are on an annual basis. So which means if you have annual cash flows, you use annual interest rate. And the annual interest rate happens to have a special name, which is called EAR, right? And then, did I answer your question, Lorenzo? I mean, I assume it is. And will we need to use the covariance and correlation formula in the exam? I would say, I mean, personally, I would say no, but then it could be yes, because I really haven't looked at your exam questions. I mean, it's been a while. But I'm just thinking about that. It's a bit unreasonable to get people to calculate covariance. But if I happen to be a dickhead and ask you that, I apologize. I really do not remember when I wrote a question like that. I mean, personally, I would say I would try not to. All right, I'll try not to get you to plug numbers into your calculator, and then after 10 minutes you get one number. That's not the point of the exam, right? The point of the exam is get you to show your understanding about what covariance and correlation is. Yeah. So, but I'll tend to say, given it's an open book exam, I mean, do prepare to have some question asking you to calculate return variance. Could be variance, could be return, could be. But I just think that, but given correlation can be calculated using covariance divided by standard deviation. So which means the correlation itself is quite easy to be computed. Covariance divided by standard deviation times standard deviation. So which means I don't want to say no, because what if someone's saying, Frank, you said that you said no, but it came up in the exam.
Could you show us just a quick equation on the Excel spreadsheet, Frank, in regard to correlation, covariance, how to measure it, what have you? Or
well, I could show you in the slide where is let's just move to the relevant slide. So this one actually give you a demonstration on how you calculate covariance correlation. I mean, let's just say if you're really worried, and just go ahead and see whether you can get the same numbers, right? Because nowadays we have to be really careful about what we can ask students. But like in the good old days, like when I was a student, everything is expected. So right, I mean, if I saw that on a slide, I may just get my hands dirty to think about whether I can reproduce this, and it should be pretty straightforward because it already tells you. It just work out the numbers, 11% minus 1%, and that times that is just 11% times minus 1%, 20% times 11. Minus 3 times minus 3, minus 15 times minus 12, minus 12 times minus 15, minus 1 times 20. And then add them up, divided by 4. I mean, it's 5, 6 minus 1, right? And then you get that. And that's covariance. And then correlation is just that one divided by the standard deviation of that, which is calculated somewhere else. And that's it, right? So is that hard? It's not hard. It's just be tedious, right? So, I mean, I personally wouldn't want to ask you that question. But then, but I don't know, right? And in fact, there's a covariance formula. I don't want to tell you that, but there is a covariance formula. in the Excel. But then that requires you to actually put numbers in. So but yeah, so I mean I would say it's gonna be very unreasonable for me to ask you to calculate covariance given this. It's a bit tedious, but is it hard? Is it not hard? So if you really worry, just go ahead and practice that. And let me keep going down the list. So Jing Zhou at 1027. Well, the short answer question in the final exam involve calculation, or is just test the theoretical knowledge as the mock practice question do? The short answer question most likely we're just gonna be, short answers. So maximum you will ask you to do one equation or two calculations, because it's a bit difficult to show that. So I don't want to rule out the chance that they may come up with something to ask you to calculate something, because in order to answer the question, you need to calculate something, right? In order to show something, you need to, I'm not ruling out a chance, but we're not going to ask you to do something that is really long if it's going to be quantitative. We're not going to ask you to do something that's really long, multiple steps, because that makes it marking try pretty hard. And so 10:30 a.m. Joshing, also for week 6 coupon bonds, is there a way to use Excel to find the yield to maturity given the price, face value, coupon rate, solving a linear equation, basically thanks. Excel can't help you solve a linear equation. You can use GoSig for that. So if you already know GoSig, then use it. But I think we said it before, we're not going to ask you to solve for yield to maturity or IRR in the exam, because we can't assume everyone has access to Excel. And we can't assume everyone have access to financial calculator. So we're not going to ask you to do that in the exam. So rest assured, you should focus on understanding what they are, right? Is that clear? Kind of clear? Okay. And when will the exam folder open tomorrow? I think that will be, I don't know, before exam, I guess. I mean, maybe you will see an announcement tonight again. I don't actually know the technical details related to that.
2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, yeah? Yeah,
so that's when the exam technically starts. And I will be actually presenting a seminar, a research seminar in another university in China. So so which means I probably won't be able to answer your questions in the forum in the morning, but I will try. I'll try to stay there as late as I can. But anyway, why are the variables on the X different? Okay, Jade asked that question at 10:33 about explain a capital market line and a security market line. Oops. We go where it is. Just over here is slide 48. So slide 48, you are presented with 2 very important graphs in finance, right? They're gonna come back again in different units. You can think of that both graph is trying to illustrate the relationship between return and risk. One approximating risk using volatility for portfolios, which is why it's called capital market line, such that so the reason why it's called capital market line, in my understanding, is because it combines with risk-free asset and the market portfolio, and everything on the green line is just like a different weight allocated to risk-free asset and market portfolio, which is why I call capital market line, right? And on the right-hand side, it's called, you have a security market line, which again is plotting the relationship between return and risk, where the risk is now approximated by or quantified by or proxied by beta, right? That's the beta. And the beta coming, so security market line, security because it's at individual level, security level, right? Company level, and that's capital market line. Okay. Hopefully that answers the question. Keep moving.
Hey Frank.
Yes.
I asked a question at like 10ish. I was just wondering if the because the multi-choice questions, the 68, they had a lot of like more theory-based questions.
Yeah.
I was wondering if it's similar in the final exam, or if it's more like practical questions.
I mean, I would say this the one that was the one that was the MCQ 68, the one that you see over here.
Yeah.
They are more sort of there are more traditional type of MCQ questions where there will be another portion of short answers that focus on the quantitative part. So which means,
yeah.
I mean, so which means in the all the previous exams that we had in FINA1221, we would have more theoretical based questions in the MCQ and a bit more quantitative in the short answers, because we want to see your steps, because we don't want to give you mark your question wrong just because you got the answer wrong, right? But yeah, so which means you could think of that where this actually helps you to prepare on the theoretical side of that of the part. Yeah. So is that a good representative of your final exam? I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay. That's kind of what I assumed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. No worries. Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
No worries. Let me keep going on the list. Okay. So are we able to do question 40? Okay. So that's the next question. Hopefully I didn't jump the queue and skip other questions. 40. Down. Okay. 40. That's the answer. So now we are working on Nick's asking that question. So this company reported net income of 300 million. The firm had depreciation expense and capital expenditure. Although they had no interest expense, the firm did have an increase in net working capital of $20 million. What is the free cash flow? So in this case, they have, let me work out the numbers before I make a mistake. Income 300, depreciation 125, capital expenditure equals to 150, and no interest expense, we don't care. Net working capital, change in working capital is 20. What is the free cash flow? So in this case, it's gonna be 300 plus 125 minus 150 minus the change in that 255, right? So whoops, put that over here. That's free cash flow. And here, free cash flow equals to net income plus depreciation minus capital expenditure minus changing net working capital. And because net income equals to revenue minus cost minus depreciation times minus tax. Okay, so hopefully that is clear, which is why that get that answer. Okay.
Yeah, that's so good. Thank you.
Perfect. Move on. So it's question 40. Question 14. Okay. 14. Yep.
It's from the revision slides in week 12.
Oh, so it's actually
multiple choice questions.
Okay. So revision slide. So which one is it?
The one in week 12.
Oh, actually, yeah. Well, in this case, let me go check it.
Okay.
And so many slides. How would that be? Which solutions? Are they different? Are they handwritten solution? Well,
I think it's the second one.
Second one? What's Daniel doing here? So many slides. Okay, those are hidden, which means hidden. Okay. That one. Yeah, I can see that. It's still loading. It's just very slow. I don't know why on my end. It's always the case. So
It's okay.
So this is not actually MCQ 40. Week 12, question 40. Yep. Oh, I mean, we can use your question over here and take a screenshot such that people can see. So this is the question. And so this one actually relies on this formula here. So is the old way of how we calculate beta before we introduce the actual way of how you calculate beta. So I mean, is a fair point to say that you don't need to worry about that. But depends on whether that's a type S firm. I need to actually see the question. So question 14 is somewhere here. There we go. Yeah, it's 1.25 out, and because I was trying to work out on my head whether that is 40 divided by 32. It's 1.25. So so this is actually a rather strange way of calculating beta for just systematic, but for S firms, because what's missing in this question here is a very important assumption here, is that we assume this is a type S firms. So let's say if you not sure what this question, why you get that answer, is because there's like, I mean, that's you know, when I was reading your question over here, I did have a worry that the question missing out a very key important information from the original example. So here, this one coming from an S firm, and what is an S firm? An S firm is only exposed to systematic risk, right? Only exposed to systematic risk, in which case we don't have that in real life. So which means that's why that's why I didn't teach this. I mean, when I was teaching this unit by myself, I didn't teach the way how you calculate beta, because it's make it confusing for students, because we don't see type S firms. In real life, we have firms that are exposed to both systematic risk and firm specific risk. But in this very case, where this is an S firm, so which means if you're going to take a look at your question over here, if you take a look at this question here, it doesn't tell you that. So so which means, in other words, the calculation here is wrong unless this is a type S firm. Does it make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay, and then
I just tried.
Sorry, you go.
Sorry. I tried reading the solutions, but I don't get the logic behind it. Why do we like minus -8 from 24%?
It's because you can think about well, you can think so let me first of all clarify. You're not going to be asked anything like that, right? That's not going to come up in your exam, because, and secondly, the question is wrong. The question is wrong because it's missing important information that this company is in my original example over here. In my original example, let me just copy that in over here. oops, in my original example, I clearly specify that as a type S firm, which is systematic risk firms, which means this firm is like a market itself, where it's only exposed to systematic risk and no firm specific risk. And in this case, you can think about it like a mini market, where the big market, if the big market either goes up to 24 or 8%, so which means plus 24 minus 8. So decrease by 8% means that you get a return of minus 8%, right? Where this one, the mini market, it goes up by 29% when the market goes to 24 and goes down by 11% when the market goes down. So which means that you can think that this mini market moves on a higher range over a larger range than the actual market, right? So one way to do that is to think about, to work out the range changes, because in this case, the probability is the same, equally likely, and there's only two scenarios. Where, so that means in this case, so that means in this case, your range is 40%, my range is 32%. You can think about, you know, I move by 1.25% more than you do, right?
Oh, okay.
And this is
So
only
it's-
very special for when you have an S firm, and in which case it was only used for illustration to show you what it is.
Oh, okay.
But we don't
Okay.
use this to calculate beta. We don't. Remember here this, because normally all our companies are exposed to both systematic and firm specific. We calculate beta using this, right? Just so this is the beta formula. That one was just only back then was only, I came out with that example just to show you that, I mean, coming from your textbook, to show you if it's only if it's only a firm that's only subject to systematic risk, that's like a mini market itself. So which means that in this case, you are talking about, you have two market and where they co-move together, except one market moves over a larger range. In this case, this market moves over a smaller range.
Oh, okay. Okay, get it now. Thank you.
Yeah. And let me put a big note here. What else? Not example. Everyone loves this color. Oh, red. No. Shade outline, text view. There you go. Right, hopefully people believe it, not them. All right, let's move. Let me move down the list. And the next one is question 48. 48. 48. I'm pretty sure I can explain it, but let me just check. I may not have. Yes, just quickly to Johnny. So Johnny asking question 48. This one was discussed on last Wednesday. So last Wednesday, if you don't mind going to the Zoom recording last Wednesday, just quickly go over there, because I explained these two questions, and I did put a note over here, is that this is an all equity firm, finance firms. So in this case, the total shares dividend paid is 60%. So I did say it's difficult and not example in this case, because it's a bit unusual. We don't give you the shares outstanding. So if you don't mind, you can go back to that recording to take a listen, right? Because if I'm gonna do it now, I'm gonna be repeating myself anyway. I won't say anything new. Hopefully that's gonna be all right. Yeah. So roughly, I don't know actually where about, but given the sequence, it's roughly second half of that recording. You can just sort of fast forward to think about where, because I did spend a bit more time on that question. And 47 is challenging. It's what kind of expected in terms of like what you would hopefully understand. But overall, this question is difficult, right?
So we won't be examined on this type of question. On
that particular one, because we won't give you something like that. We will give you a bit more specific, like how we usually give you about, you know, tell you the number of shares outstanding, and just we're gonna separate that out from you know, from the growth in the dividend payment.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
No worries. Okay. So that's last Wednesday. So 02 June 2021. All right, so moving down, SDRI, standard deviation of return, means we calculate the standard deviation based on individual stock returns. Correct. So the question here is that 11:01 a.m. SDRI means we calculate the standard deviation based on the individual stock returns. That's it. Yeah, that's right. So RI here is indexing for a company I, and SDRI means that that's a standard deviation of company I.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
No worries. And then Tess asked the question at 11:01 a.m., which was answered. Hopefully, was answered. And then 11:03, there is a private chat. About 5. I'm actually not sure about the context of that question. Gabriel, would you mind elaborating? What do you mean by that?
Because I remember coming across a question where like I had to find the answer as like x to the power of like 4 or 5 or something.
Yeah.
So I was wondering whether I could use Excel to do it, because on a regular calculator, it only goes up to x to the power of 3.
Oh, I mean, so your question here is that, let me just start a random. Oh, this is actually not today's Excel spreadsheet. Oops. I was wondering what the
No,
heck is.
I can't remember where that question was from, but I remember. Oh wait, I think it's one of those cash flow questions. And
so let's say, for example, let's say, yeah, you're trying to say, let's say if we're trying to solve this, is that right?
A whole equation like that, like
Yes.
x4, x5. Yeah.
Well, I mean, in this case, to solve it, you just do this. Take a log function, a natural log on both sides. In which case, that becomes 5 equals to, 5 times ln x equals to ln 100. Sorry, is that oops? I must have done it from
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I what I meant was like a whole equation, like 4x to the power of 5 plus like 4x to the power of 4 and etc. going on until like, you know, until it's an x to the power 0, like a quadratic equation.
And I don't think we expect to solve for x, do we? I mean, in that case, I don't think so, because after all, this is not a math unit to actually get you to solve a linear equation. No, I could only imagine that will come up in like interest rate, where you have multiple powers, because that's the only way to ask for power. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember doing a question involving interest rates that had me figuring out like to the power of 4.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, well, I mean, we're gonna be very reasonable. We're not gonna ask you to solve for x. You know, I mean, you're not gonna see anything different from what you've already seen in terms of solving equation. I mean, we have get you to solve for number of periods, for example. Like, for example, if you think about like in your annuity, where present value equals to coupon, no coupon, like cash flow divided by 1 plus r times 1 minus 1 over 1 plus r power to n, right? So we could get you to solve for what n equals to, right? I mean, this has been done many times. So that's more like the focus for the first half of the unit. Unlikely we're gonna get you to, but then, you know, you are expected to know how to do solve for n, for example.
Okay.
Anyway, and if you're not sure, how to do it, I'm pretty sure I say something about rearrange. I actually gave. So if you go to discussion board, search for rearrange. I think I have one equation, one thread. I just talked about how to do that. Looks like I haven't. I thought I did. Rearrange. I thought I did, but maybe. Yeah. If anyone's confused about how to solve for rearrange, please ask that. Because I just feel like that's more like the focus for the first half to get a calculate number of periods, right? But I mean, it's not going to be the focus for the second half unit, right? And I'm pretty sure.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah. No worries.
Is
Go
it
ahead.
possible to use the goal-6 function for this?
Yes, it is possible.
Okay.
Yeah, it is possible.
Okay.
So
Thank
yeah,
you.
that saved your life, right? So, and then Joshua asked a question saying, Tess asked a question about a format exam. Seems like a lot of theory based. I'm not sure. I just answered that, so not sure whether you heard it. But then, so the practice questions on the LMAS is more like focusing on the theoretical base because that's what we used to have, right? But your final exam is going to be a good mix of both in the MCQs. So the security, so Jade asking the question at 11:05. So the security market line only matches systematic risk. A security market line illustrates the relationship between beta and return. And beta is used to quantify systematic risk, used to approximate systematic risk. There we go. So is security market line illustrate the relationship between return and beta, where beta is trying to approximating a systematic risk, trying to. Joshing at 11:07, just to be sure, for the capital market line, the curve that it sits on with the red and blue colors just now signifies the return and risk for efficient and inefficient portfolio. So yes, so in this case, the red curve was the efficient frontier of all the risky asset. So I think it's worthwhile just to quickly move back over here. So the red line here, the red curve here, not line, the red curve here is efficient frontier of risky investments that you can observe, right? Again, all this is done on a theoretical base. We didn't tell you exactly how to plot this. Whereabout is sitting? Is that exactly sitting at 8%? Here, this point, and 25%. So is that exactly how? Is that the only way to plot it? No, right? We're just saying, theoretically speaking, this is the efficient frontier of risky investment that you can achieve with what we have in the market. And is that possible? Let me just do a quick one. Which means, is that possible to draw another curve? Just think that as a curve is I'm using my mouse cursor. Can we actually extend that? The answer is no, right? Why not? Because that's not possible. If it's possible, we would have done it. So that means this red line, the red curve that you observe, is the most northwestern frontier that you can draw based on all your individual investment that you have over here. Which coming from this one just means, like, imagine you have thousands of companies, thousands of investment that you can make, and combining all of them and various weight allocated to it, and eventually that would help you to draw this curve over here. And that curve just means, are we able to invest? Are we able to invest? Oops. Are we able to invest at this point? Here, the answer is no. It's not possible, right? Can we invest in this point here? Yes, we can, because that we can just invest here. But why do we do that? We don't, because we can do better by going up over here. Why? Because at this point, it offers you high return and gives you the same volatility, same standard deviation. So which means we can invest anywhere here, but we don't do that because they are not as efficient as here, which is why this one is called efficient frontier. Anything below it is not as efficient as that. Everything above it is not achievable. Is that clear? Joshing? Sorry, okay, let me move down the chat box. Okay, so this is why it's make it difficult to teach online and teach in sort of like on Zoom, because if I would, teaching face to face, I'll be able to I'll be able to gauge on your understanding based on your facial expression. Anyway, so and that line over here, the let's go to this graph. Go to this graph. So that green line over here is more efficient than the efficient frontier before. And the reason why is because if you think about this, think about like, let's say if you make this investment, right? And that one is showing you is not as efficient as you would invest here, right? Because this one gives you higher return than that. And how is that line achievable? Because you combine it with risk-free asset. So that means in this case, that shows the whole derivation of why you want to add in like a risk-free asset. Because risk-free asset is risk-free. It has zero correlation with everything else, zero variance itself as well. So which makes it like you extend the investment possibilities, right? You extend the extra investment opportunities, which means without a risk-free investment, can you actually invest here? No, the answer is no, you can't, because everything is investable is over here. Can you invest over here? No, you can't, because everything is investable are here, right? But adding the risk-free investment extends your investment opportunities. And then, but then people go, why do I stop at this line? Why wouldn't I go above here? If I'm going above here, you can see every line is more superior than that line, right? But why do I just stop there? Why do I just don't I just keep going like that? Then every line point over there is more superior than that. It's like, yeah, of course we can do it. But why couldn't you do like this? Because it's not possible, right? It's not possible. We wish it's possible. So which means the maximum you can go is the tangent line to the efficient frontier, because it has to be possible, right? It has to be, you have to be able to actually do it. So which means you'll be tangent to the efficient frontier, which combines with the existing one and the risk asset. And this is the best achievable outcome that you can make. And given we are all knowledge person, we're all educated, and given that we all understand this, such that everyone's going to be holding the investment on this green line. And because we do that, because everyone does that, then because if every individual does that, that means in aggregate, the whole society is doing it. And that means that makes that to be market portfolio, right? That's what the whole derivation in that way was trying to say, right? So that makes that to be the, yeah. So which means in this case, we only invest along this green line. Does that capture reality? It doesn't, right? It doesn't. It's just a model. It's just a model. And it's a model that fails. But people won Nobel Prizes. Anyway, so keep moving down the list. I still don't understand changes in net working capital. So let me search up that thread. So for the person who is asking this question, I still don't get it net working capital, you could think of it really. I mean, I may have some extra explanation over here. That you can really think of it that a net working capital is an account. So let's just say every company has, every project needs to have an account such that the account would have enough money to cover the day-to-day basis, right? And but it's not an actual expense that you're covering. It's like an account that you're sitting there just to make sure that, so when people see this account, they have some confidence. It's like a collateral, right? It's like an account that is such that just in case you run into something. So we need an account there just to have enough cash basis to get the business going, right? But the reason why we only care about a change in net working capital is because once you set up the account, the money sits there. So which means when you initiate a project, let's say the project requires you to put $5,000 in the net working capital account. That 5,000 is typically sitting there until the end. So which means once you're putting $5,000 cash into the account, you're not going to contributing more to it typically, right? So which means that 5,000 is going to sit there. So which means in terms of your cash flow, you need to put in 5,000 first. At the end, when the project finished, no one needs that account anymore. You withdraw that $5,000. That's what you call recovery. And the reason why we care about changes is because typically that $5,000 is saved up there, right? It's just sitting there. It's not doing anything. So which means unless there's a change to that, otherwise it was just going to be the same amount as what you originally put in. So which means you're not going to double counting it, because let's say if the working capital account is $5,000, you're not going to double count it every year for 5,000 because it doesn't require you to put additional 5,000. It's just going to be the same $5,000 you're sitting there, right?
Okay, but if we see the words like increases in net working capital,
yeah,
what does it mean? We put money into it?
The increase in that just means suddenly you need to put in more into that account. So let's say initially people are saying just put $5,000 in that account, and then 2 years down the track, people saying, oh, you need to put additional 2,000 to it. So now the working capital account is 7,000, but you're not putting 7,000 into it. You just need to put extra $2,000 into that.
Oh, it's the difference.
That's right. That's why we care about the change, right? The difference.
Okay, so if it increases, then it's a cash outflow.
If it increases, that means you have to put in that money. So which means that you need to. So that means you need to decrease the free cash flow. So which is why it's minus change in net working capital. Because if that account needs to go up, that means you need to allocate more cash to that account, which means it's going to be a cash outflow to you, which flow into that account.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. No worries. Well, I mean, really, I mean, I'm a bit ashamed to say that, but if you really cannot understand, if anyone really cannot understand that, just think about it as like a collateral that you do with your friends when you're borrowing money, right? It's just like they want to say, okay, if you want to borrow 20 grand from me, just putting $10,000 into a separate account that we both can access to, such that just in case you run away, right? And sometimes because the economic condition is not doing so well, they say, oh, maybe you need to putting a bit more just in case if you're gonna run away, because I heard your business is not doing well, right? So it's just like collateral, which is why you only care about the changes to that account, because once it's sitting there, you will sit there until the end. All right. And so Lorenzo asking, can beta be considered as a risk elasticity? I'm not sure. I don't want to overly interpret beta. So beta here is your sensitivity to market, right? It's basically if market moves by 1%, and if you move by 1.2%, that means you're 1.2 times more risky than the market, which is what the formula really suggesting. If you think about the formula here, right? This term here is called market risk premium. Let me just write it. think about CAPM formula, ERI equals to RF plus right. So if you rewrite it, this is called risk premium for asset I. This whole term, where ERM minus IF is market risk premium. And if you rewrite it, you get ERI minus IF divided by ERM minus IF equals to beta. So really you can think about from this way, you can think about beta is just measuring how much more your risk premium is compared to the market risk premium. Right? The reason why I call premium is because it benchmark against the risk-free rate, right? So in this case, if your beta is 1.2, that just means for every 1% in 1% movement in the market risk premium, your risk premium moves by 1.2%, which is why it's a bit riskier in the market. And if beta is 0.6, that means you're moving less than the market, so you're less risky than the market. Okay, and question 57, let's take a look. So now moving down the list to, you guys can't see it, but 1121, as in that's private chat, 57. So 57, 58, 59, and 60. 59 and 60 are explained on the discussion forum. And but let me just screenshot the whole thing while we're on this. So yeah, let's go to the discussion board. Finding that. $960. Let me copy my my answer. That's 59 to 60. I can just quickly talk about 57 or 58. Oops. So 57 here. Oops, doesn't look like I can change it. Anyway, it's 57. So 57 is just to do with expected overall payoff to Bank A. So in this case, given that you have Bank A has 1,000 loans, and each one is outstanding with $100,000. So which means the expected value. So let's keep reading. 6% probability of default, which means they get 0, and which means 94% chance. So 6% chance you get $0. That means 94% chance you're getting back $100,000, right? So the expected value of one loan in A equals to probability of default times the outcome plus probability of not default times the outcome. And given they are independent, you have 1,000 loans. That equals to that times 1,000. Right? And where do I get this formula? expected value of X equals to sum of probability of event I times outcome of event I. And that is covered in your, I believe, week 10 lecture note. Okay. Does that answer your question, Gabriel?
Yep, answered. Thanks, Frank.
Yeah, no worries. And 59 and 60 just read that, right? And I do want to say this, they won't example, but it doesn't hurt to know more, right? It doesn't hurt to know more. And I also talk about the individual one mean here as well. And yeah, oops, I should have talked about it. So Lorenzo was saying, so the market portfolio is located on a frontier where the portfolio will provide the greatest return for the lowest risk. No, so if the market portfolio here is simply saying, if we take a look at that graph again, is that because previously without a risk-free investment, if you think about without it, I don't actually know what this is. Okay, there we go. I'm trying to understand what that is. So let's say previously without a risk-free investment, this is what you can invest in, right? Hopefully we all understand that at that point. And we could invest here, but we don't because we want to invest here because it's better, or we can invest here for the sort of like same level return but lower risk. So that's why we invest on this frontier. And the reason why we don't invest over this section of the curve is because this section of the curve is better, right? Such that we only invest in the red one. But then people go, well, we actually have a sort of like a risk-free investment. So we actually have risk-free investment. So that means in this case, if we combine that, if we combine risk-free investment and any point along this line, So in math, if you connect two dots, you're able to draw a line, right? So which means I can combine that line with that line to draw a line, But of course, you don't want to draw that line. So we can draw any line. And the reason why we draw this particular line is because this line gives me the highest risk return trade-off than that one, than any other lines below it. So if you think of it, if you compare that black line and then blue line over here, this one has higher return than that for the same volatility. And that line would have, let me just draw another line. Let's draw another black line. So if you compare the green line and the black line, the reason why we prefer green line over black line is because the black line is not as efficient as that, because you can see that over here, it's the wrong color. If you pick any point, you can see that this green line does much better job than the others because the green line will give you high return for the same risk, right? So which means you want to do the green line. And the reason why you don't go above it, is because you can't, because you simply cannot do that, because that's not possible, right? You have to be combining with whatever is possible on the market, which is why you do this. So to answer the question, does that one give you the highest return and lowest risk? I think in a way, yes or no. But then of course, the reason why we're saying higher risk, you can keep going and still getting higher risk. But then that's not without a compromise, right? Because you can keep going and get higher risk, but you're taking the higher return. So in this case, yes, so the answer is yes, in the sense that this one does give you higher risk and return trade-off than any other line, right? Than any other line. And but exactly at what point on that line that you want on the line you want to invest in depends on your own risk return preference. Some people prefer to take that much risk and get risk return. Some people prefer to get that much risk and get that return. Okay. And keep going on the list. Do you remember if the exam difficulty for the exam is easier or harder than it is? Oh, it is easier, right? I think I'm trying to say that objectively. It is easier. Could you please go to the paint where you show the green line where the risk-free asset? Yes, I am over here.
The section of the green line that sits above the red line.
Yeah.
The one that is no, the one towards the end.
Towards the end?
Oh no. Yeah, there's like the green line which is above the red line.
Oh, I see.
Yep,
you mean here. Like,
yep.
Like here.
Yep. Is it considered as like an achievable portfolio?
It is achievable portfolio. So
because I thought that the achievable ones would be the ones below the red line.
So let me tell you, at this point, oh, that's huge. So at this point, at this point over here, 100% in market portfolio, 0% in risk-free. That's that point over here. At that point, and at this point is 0% in market portfolio and 100% in risk-free. Right.
Okay.
So along this line, on this section over here, let me use green, is that between 0 and 100% in market portfolio, and between 0 and 100% in risk-free. So that's what's on this section of the line. And your question here is, how about here, right?
Yep.
This is above 100% in market portfolio, less than 0% in risk-free. And when we say less than 0%, means that we borrow to invest. So which means in this case, we're able to buy more. So let's say in this case, originally the maximum we can buy is 100% in market portfolio, but now we can actually borrow from the market. This is what quite common in reality is that people would say, you know, let's say if I've got 100 grand to invest, I may actually borrow another 50 grand from the bank to invest, such that I can invest 50% in that.
Invest. So what is the risk-free investment in this case if it's negative?
It means you're borrowing. So let's say previously, if it's between 0 and 100%, let's say if it's 20%, that means 20% of your wealth is putting in a bank account. 80% of the wealth goes to invest in the share market. And in this case, if it's negative, it just means I'm borrowing money to invest.
Borrowing money to invest. Okay. Thank you.
No worries. There you go, just in case if anyone wants to see that again. And what I think the section represent. Well, the intersection here represent that is I mean it's tangent line, it's tangent to it. It doesn't really intersect. It intersect on every other point. It tangent to it such that means that at that point is 100% allocated to and so basically every line on that point represent is like a portfolio that is invested in the risky asset. So in this case, that is not special than any others, except that is the most achievable, that's the best achievable outcome combining with risk-free asset. Okay. Okay, I mean, Peter explained that as well, so that's good. So have I gone through question 59 of 60A MCQ? If not, I can do that. 59. So we have 4 minutes to 12, but that's fine. I can spend a bit more time with you guys today. 59 of 68. I have not, but I have. So I have not talked about in the video, but I have talked about it on the forum, which I pasted over here. So take a look at that. But because the reason why I'm saying it's not example, because here, given their independent outcomes, so that actually let me go to your lecture slide. We have given you, but we haven't given you the exact one as for these formulas. This one. Sorry, it's too many slides. There we go. If you take a look at the two stock portfolio case, if we have two stocks are independent, the correlation is 0. So which means the variance is going to be the sum of the individual variance, right? And then for question 59, because given all the 1,000 loans underlying bank A are independent from each other, because the chain of default is independent. So which means the variance of the portfolio is just going to be sum of the individual ones. In this case, you have 1,000 of them, that's just 1,000 times that, right? So that equation over here, we did not actually tell you, but it's that hard to understand? It's not really. Are we going to ask you that? Probably not. But so yeah, so that particular equation here is what's key to answering that question, right? But because we didn't tell you that, we didn't tell you specifically that if they're independent, autocorrelation will be 0, such that the sum, such that the sum of the variance is going to be just going to be individual sums because they're all independent. And it should be, and then up here, that's the answer, right? It's just to show you how to get B. So Lorenzo, will you invest above the 100%? Are you borrowing money? Or are you borrowing this? No, are you borrowing the money? So beyond this point, you're borrowing money, which is borrowing from risk-free to invest in it. And whether you'll be borrowing stocks is possible because remember this red curve here is achieved by some sort of weighting in the underlying stocks, which means some of the weight in the stock may be negative. We don't know, right? We don't know. Well, we're just saying here there exists a line, and that curve here is the best, is the most achievable, most northwestern curve that you could achieve. All right, and then I've got a question at 11:55. Can you explain average covariance between stocks? So that relates to this. So here, would an equally weighted portfolio of many stocks, one can show you, and again, it's just math. One can show you that it's actually deriving from this formula, deriving from this equation over here. One can show you that the variance of the portfolio, if you have n stocks, equals to 1 times n times 1 over n times average variance plus that. And here, as n approaching infinity, 1 over n approaches 0. 1 minus 1 over n approach 1, such that we were saying in a large enough portfolio, n is above some numbers like 1,000, right? What matters to your portfolio variance is the average covariance between the stocks. as because of we showed it, right? And why does it matter to know this? Because even though we don't actually hold an equally weighted portfolio in real life, such that, for example, let's just say if you have $1 million to invest, sometimes you may want to allocate a bit more to your stocks that you know better or you favor a little bit. But what we were saying here is that as long as you're holding a reasonably equally weighted, which means that on average they're all like 2% each. If you have 50 stocks, on average they're 2% each. Then on average that would hold. So the reason why we say on average is because let's say if you're holding like a 10 portfolio stocks, but you spend 99% of money in one stock, then that relationship that doesn't hold, right? But we're just saying on average, people don't do that, right? Because people typically invest in a closely linked, equally weighted portfolio, and that means that in that case, then it's what the covariance that matters, which means which means when you're picking a new stock into your portfolio, you're not worrying about the individual variance. You're worrying about the covariance, which means you're worrying about the correlation, the co-movement, right? So which means that one of the implications from that formula, which I may not talk about in that week, is that when you think about reducing your portfolio variance, when you think about investing in new stock, new asset, you want to think about whether that actually moves alongside with your current ones, right? Because of that, right? Because from that equation, it tells you it's the covariance that matters, such that that's why you can think of it. If you mainly invest in equity market, then you would say maybe I should put some money into real estate market, right? Because the co-movement between the real estate market movement and my stocks tend to be smaller than buying another stock. Okay. Yeah. And yeah, you go.
What is the square root of average covariance? It's on slide 22. Yep. Just one above this, 22. Yep. What is the square root of average covariance? Is it the correlation?
Not really. No, this one is just saying here is that because as n gets larger, variance is approximating by the average covariance, such that the volatility is approximated by the square root of the average variance.
Do we assume that there are only 2 stocks in this portfolio?
Do we assume that? We don't make the assumption in this particular exam. It's saying very large.
Very large. Okay, so I was just wondering why we multiply this 0.42 times.
It's because it's 0.4 of the volatility itself, and 0.4 of because saying here, what is the volatility of very large portfolio stock within an industry in which the stocks have? So in this case, remember covariance is asset I and asset Y. So between asset I and asset X and asset Y. So in this case, this saying on average, this one would have a stock volatility. So they all have a volatility of 40%. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah. It just makes it just calculation a bit easier to illustrate. That's the average covariance. Because typically you do want to calculate the average covariance, which means that you calculate covariance of A and B, average covariance of B and C, covariance of C and D, and then you average them up. In this case, just make the calculation easier, saying, oh, they all have roughly the same volatility, which is 40%.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
No worries. And so, Jade, what greater than 100% in market performance? That means if you have $100,000 investing market portfolio before at 100%, that means if you borrow 200 grand from a bank, you now have 120 grand investing in market portfolio. That's what I mean. But of course, you have to repay that 20 grand sometime in the future, right? Next one, can I assume that this formula to be used in question 53 will be the same as 59? I don't know. Let's take a look at what 53 is. Yes. Yes, and I think actually I explained this somewhere. So to when please have a look at this. Actually, why don't I just copy and paste to make your life easier? Where is the... There you go. Yeah, so explain that. So is I would say it's the same formula, but it's the same formula for the individual one. Yeah. So Lucas goes, what is the significance of having to be borrowing money to invest, as illustrated by the other part of the graph? What is the significance of that is it depends on your risk preference. Some people prefer to do this because they somehow are very positive about the future and because they want high risk, high return. Right. And yeah, I mean, let's say if the stock market is going well, some people say I will put my house in a mortgage, and then I can just have more money to invest in the stock market because I think I can get more return from the stock market. Right. That's right. This really depends on your own risk preference. Does that answer your question, Lucas?
Yeah, excuse me, Frank. It's all well and good to invest money, but you alluded to the fact that once you get to the higher part of that graph,
yeah,
you have to always borrow money to invest.
Because yeah, that's right. Because otherwise you will stop here. Because if you can't borrow, that means just stop here. That's all you can do, right?
Okay.
And if you want to invest more in the market portfolio, you can just keep going. And let's say if borrowing is not possible, if borrowing money is not possible, then that this is actually something. This is actually an extension. But given that I just asked that, so I guess I can tell you. Excuse me. So if borrowing is not possible, then you will be doing along this line and then join this red curve, right?
Yeah.
Okay, because you can't borrow from the risk-free, but then you can still invest along a efficient frontier, right? Because that's what's possible without risk-free asset.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And Lorenzo saying to eliminate firm-specific risk, yet add to portfolio shares that have as close to a correlation of -1 as possible. Correct. That's right. Yes, that's what you're trying to achieve, but you don't see -1 correlation very often. In fact, -1 correlation is only possible, not only possible, it's only a sort of like achievable if you buy an asset and sell that same asset. Just don't do it. So that'll give you -1 because a long position in a share is -1 to the short position in the share. So anyway.
You mean buy it and sell that security straight away, you mean, to get -1?
Yes, but I mean, that point itself is kind of like funny, right? I'm just trying to say it's a joke. But when you're doing a second-year unit, you know that is achievable because it's achievable through buying derivatives, right? But given we don't talk about derivatives, I don't want to mention a name, right? It's in another unit that I teach. If you go to Frank Liu, that's my personal website. Some of you already know. You've got to teaching. We have Introduction to Finance. This is what we did. Because I don't actually refer to this website that much this year. This is what my old note, and this is my own recording and stuff. Anyway, okay. And you can go to another one. It's called Derivative Product and Market. Go over there. This is what can be done to get -1 correlation. Anyway, so that means we borrow to invest more. Yes, we borrow to invest more. If we don't invest equally, does it mean we are unable to diversify the portfolio as well? You can still diversify a portfolio because the slide here in week 12, week 11, shows you that roughly where. Let me figure out where about it is. Yes, roughly here. This one, it shows you that even if they don't have positive correlation, and even if you don't equally weighted, in fact, people don't actually invest equally. I'm telling you that. Because as soon as the asset price moves, let's say originally you're putting 10% in 10 stocks, as soon as the share price moves, and they don't move in the same proportion, you then have to rebalance your portfolio, right? Because let's say some of them go up by 1%, some of them go up by 2%, some of them go down by 3%, some of them go up by 10%. In this case, after one period, your weight is no longer the same as before, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you take a look at this example here, right?
Yep.
What actions need to rebalance the portfolio is because if they don't get the same return, if they don't have the same return, you then have to rebalance the portfolio, right?
Mm-hmm.
So which means people don't actually invest equally, but they're trying to, right? Because they have a target, they have a theme, they have an investment theme. Because unlike your personal investment, when you invest in a big fund, you will invest for a big fund. You have an investment committee that you have to pass. I used to work in a private equity fund. You have an investment committee where there was a lot of agendas to go through when you're trying to investment philosophy. Yeah, that you're trying to go through, trying to persuade that is important to hold that stocks. Yeah, but what this example here is showing you, even if you don't do it perfectly, like perfectly as in like equally weighted, that is still better than the weighted average.
Still better.
Yeah, so which means you still can achieve diversification. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What happens if we don't try to rebalance the portfolio and just let it be?
Then it becomes unbalanced.
So it's not good if it's unbalanced?
Well, I mean, a good or bad depends on. So this is actually quite a philosophical question about what good and bad is. So if your criteria of good and bad is to hold on to your original investment theme, which is keeping 10% in each stock, then not rebalancing is definitely not good because it didn't stick to your own original goal. But what if it turned out to be actually better in terms of like you get higher return? Then then it depends, right? Because this is a bit unfortunate that it's actually is a bit deeper than that. It's because we don't actually get to observe parallel universe. Let me quickly show you. Let me just find a version of my slide from say last year. So when I was teaching the recent return last year. By the way, this this recording is actually available on YouTube. So if you want to listen to my version, if you can go to YouTube, you can find it, right? But anyway, I don't encourage you to do it because you already have it now. But I want to show you one graph, if possible. So this graph over here of the putting money in. So over here, this is actually not a return distribution per se. So which means if you're looking at a return distribution we generated here, this is not actually a distribution. A distribution means every event is independent. Every outcome is independent from each other. But of course it's not. What happened in 1929 is linked to 1930. What happened in 1930 is linked to 1931, right? So in this case, this is actually one possible path. Let me just write here. So this is only one possible path. But that's turned out to be the only one we observe, right? So we made stories based on that path. In an alternate universe, there's nothing to do with religion. In an alternate universe, there may be different paths. So there may be a universe where small stocks actually perform worse than treasury bills. We don't know that, right? But finance is trying to say, based on what we observe, we're trying to come up with series to explain. So, which means if finance was a subject, and that's all we observe here, I don't think you would say risk. You would say there's a positive relationship between risk and return, because invest in small stocks back in 1926, 28 to 32, that really sucks, right? So, but then because we live long enough, we get to observe this. So all based on that longer path, we say, okay, there's a high risk, high return, right? But if all you can see here is this, then you could say it's like completely random, right? Completely random.
Yep. Okay. Okay, thanks.
No worries. And as we get normal questions on the chat box, I assume people are happy with it. So yeah, I mean that really concludes our session today. And your exam is 2 p.m. tomorrow, is that right?
Yep.
Okay, 2 p.m. tomorrow. So which means that by the time you hit 4 p.m., you will reach another, I don't know, like another pinnacle of your life. that's ITF free. You don't have to worry about interacting with finance anymore. Yeah. So there's no song today because I didn't prepare for anything. But so there's not gonna be any like a second surprise, right? Because it wouldn't be a surprise if it's a second surprise. And good luck to your final exam, and hopefully you can hear back from you regarding your feedback. Regarding the final exam, or regarding the unit, regarding Daniel's teaching, my teaching, and how you want to improve it, whether you want to make the exam impossible, we can do that for next year, as long as you don't repeat next year, so we can make the next year group suffering even more. All right. Anyway, thank you, and hopefully you enjoy and have a good break.
Pleasure, Frank. Thank you. Great teaching. Cheers for that. Bye.
No worries. Bye. I mean, I'm still going to be available on the forum. So if you've got any questions,
speak to them. I'll ask more questions. Cheers.
Yeah. All right. Enjoy. Bye.
Thanks, Frank. See ya.
Bye, Gabriel. Bye, Josh. Bye, Lucas. No worries.